So howdy, how is everybody? Excited to get going this year, year two. Just really excited about the group of ladies we have on the field, both athletically and depth-wise. We obviously open up this weekend. We have Valpo, Lehigh, and Tulsa. Some 41, seasons last year from some of those programs, a lot of postseason experience. I may or may not have heard that Lehigh can sometime nip us in the butt from Coach Simon back there, but excited to get going, to compete. I would say last year at this time, I was like, we need to practice more. This year, I feel like we're ready to play. So a lot of depth, like I said, a lot more athleticism. Return all of our pitchers and added a pitcher. So again, I'm excited. Let's get out and play some ball.
So I think our first one is probably, and from Cease.
So Trish, let's talk about the starting rotation. I
Yep.
mean, do you have right now, let's say, top three, or maybe top three won't get to till we get to SEC play?
Pitching wise, we're going to go by staff. So I have this weekend of how we're going to stack up. Right now, I don't foresee any of our pitchers pitching 7 innings complete. That can change. So right now, we're probably going to pair 2 a game. And then we're going to do some different things with Kennedy, just because of her dynamic, left-handed throwing with such high velo. You might see her start and finish a game, the same game. So we're kind of working through some things. So early on in the year, you might see a lot of movement, but really that's all that's doing is kind of prepping us for SEC and postseason. So still a lot of, just difference in our pitching staff, a lot of adversity. So we have, still our left-handedness. We have righty up, righty down. We added Brooke Vestal, who is pretty dynamic, throws, low 60s, can go up and down, but has a really high spin rate. So those of you that are pitching geeks like I am, she's about a 22 to 2400 RPM on some of her pitches. So it really looks like a Frisbee up there. She's able to throw 3 different speeds. So she should be able to go through some lineups for us. I know Preston last year was kind of one of our specialty pitchers. I see Vestal, Brooke being in that role, probably getting a little bit more innings just because of her ability to go up and down and change speeds, which Preston was mostly down and change up. So I think we have a really good kind of combination of things. There's some things that are running through my head. You can have Kennedy, who's from the left side, throwing, plus 70. Then you bring in Brooke Vestal, who is obviously in the low 60s, higher RPM. Their balls break on different planes. So obviously lefty's going this way, Brooks is going this way. And then you can bring in like somebody like Shaley or even Levitt that then again counteracts Brooks' movement profile and has more velo, or you can bring Kennedy back in. So a lot of different things that we're kind of going to play with that I'm excited about.
So, but the next one's gonna go way back to the
Hey,
team.
Coach, just what do you want year 2 of Trisha Ford to look like? 2 questions. First one, what do you want year 2 of Trisha Ford to look like?
I think for me, year 2 is the hardest. And what I mean by that is the honeymoon is over. So the players, are like, oh my gosh, like they love all the change and the new stuff, and the newness has worn off. And so we've spent a lot of time purposefully off the field with the team of getting them together. And so to answer your question, I would say more grit, right? Some of those Sunday games, being able to pull those off, being able to pull off some more of those close games that we didn't pull off last year, where we lost them in like the last half of the game, so the 5th, 6th, and 7th innings. I think if you look at our programs over the years, we've always been really gritty. We had a game against Utah where we scored, I think, 9 runs with 2 outs in the 7th inning, like getting our team back to that. So grit, fight, and then just really for them to bond as a team on and off the field. I think that's the other piece that's huge. I think, when you look at, teams that are championship teams, they're not always the most talented, but they're the team that at the end of the day will fight for each other. And so those are kind of the things that we've taken on this off season and really hammered out. So competitive. Yeah.
And I know you open at home, but how do you like the pre-conference home and away kind of traveling or staying at home shake up compared to maybe last year?
Yeah, so this year we kind of did on again, off again, right? So at home, away, and that was on purpose. For us, it's getting some good road competition. I thought that was key. Last year we had some really good road competition, and then this year, obviously, bringing in some big programs. For our home, tournament. I think last year the 12th man didn't get to see us play early on a lot, and they really started to show up during conference season. And this year, our season ticket numbers are already up by quite a bit. And I think it's, being able to come out, see a really good product, but able to see them more often, So I'm excited. I'm excited for it to get rowdy. You guys know that. I love environments in which it's hard for visiting teams to come in, but playing at Davis, that's it's such a joy. It's the best, facility in the country, and we're obviously very comfortable there. So this weekend, hopefully, we're supposed to have not freezing weather. We have some rain that we're kind of maybe dodging a little bit. I don't know. The forecast keeps changing every 2 minutes, but excited to be able to open up at home in front of the 12th man.
We are gonna slide over.
Coach, some of the girls were mentioning, some of the hitters were mentioning the pitchers, kind of guys trying to implement new stuff with them, maybe slight tweaks, new pitches and new stuff. But I'm curious, not just with the pitchers, but hitters and fielders. I imagine during the season, once it gets going last year, you kind of have to stick within, like, this is kind of your profile. We need you to excel at that. With the off season, maybe a little more time to tinker with some stuff and maybe add some new elements to people's games. How do you kind of go about trying to find those areas that maybe you can introduce to their profile?
Yeah, I think what we do is we sit down as a staff in the summer and really look at each individual player and like where are they deficient? Where do we think we can attack it? I think really good players and really good programs get better year after year. And so I know from a pitching perspective, and we were talking about that earlier, it's important for them to have something new every year. Whether it be velo or a different speed or a different pitch or a pitch that pairs off of their strength. I think that is really important, and I also feel that same way when it comes to offense. Defensively, you're going to kind of stay in that same realm. Rylan and Sav they can play a multitude of positions on the infield, but everybody else is pretty kind of locked in. But I think offensively, it's having the conversation with Keely Williams of like, Keely, last year, you did X, Y, and Z. This year, I need you to have a little bit more power. And for her, it's like intent. I need Amari to have a little bit more juice in her bat. And these are some of the things that we think you can do. Coco, your short game is good, but you need to be able to execute the bunt on the first try 50% of the time. Like, we give them some parameters that I think really helps them as from a player development standpoint. To understand how they can get better and help our team. Trin, I thought last year was dynamic in the preseason. Really, got hot, and then as our lineup had to change and Julia got hurt, you could see some things she started to chase and go out of the zone. So you just have those conversations with those athletes of like, this is when you were really good, and these are the things that you were executing at a high level, and then these are some of the areas that we kind of faltered as the year went on, and so then you address those in the off season. So, I think you just kind of always are tinkering. Yeah.
So now for the third row on the left.
Coach, can you kind of talk about the importance of these early non-conference tournaments, especially when it comes to kind of like experimenting with lineups and pitching rotations and I guess learning more about your team and what you have on hand?
Yeah, they're huge, to be honest with you. And you're going to see us do a lot of interesting things. You may or may not see some pitchers that are hitting in the starting lineup, and that's not going to be the case. We're trying to get some bats in the lineup. So I think for us, it's really trying to establish who's going to, kind of rise to the lights. We have some kids that I think are gamers. We have some kids that have done really good in practice, and so what do they look like when it comes time for their number to be called? I think the other piece is finding out who is somebody that is good at coming off the bench, because that role is really hard, whether it be a defensive replacement or a pinch hitting opportunities. Obviously, AC, Ayanna Coleman, has done a really good job for us coming off the bench. And I always tell the story of I had a kid when I was at Fresno State who was a pinch hitter only her freshman year. And then just kind of evolved and became an All-American her last year. And so, just talking to your players through that of like, hey, I know you're not happy with just being a pinch hitter, and I'm actually okay with you not being happy about it. But here's what you need to do on a consistent basis. So I think the other thing is really figuring out who works, well from a matchup standpoint, whether it be pitching, whether it be our lineup, in different scenarios. So if we have a lefty power coming at us, who does well with that matchup, who does well with a righty power. I think putting us in some stressful situations are always good. That's when you really kind of grow and figure out, what your DNA is. So, preseason for me is a lot of experimenting, because once it becomes conference play, that's the real stuff, and then getting you ready for postseason. But preseason, there's obviously, like I said, that we are playing around with some things, but we also need to get our wins in there. And so that's really important because conference is so tough. And so our goal is to be, winning at a high rate around that 70% mark, entering into conference play, just from an RPI standpoint.
So I think there's time for the final one.
Howdy, Coach.
Howdy.
So you mentioned Brooke, and a couple of your players mentioned how tough she is. How fun is it as the one who's calling the pitches to know the arsenal of pitches that she has, and just talk about, how cool it is as a coach to be able to do that?
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of go in a different direction, but Brooke has been such a joy to coach. And what I mean by that is usually when you're in your 6th year, you're like, don't fuss with me, like just let me be who I am. And she is somebody that wants to be great, so is always learning, constantly learning. And so being able to have those kind of conversations and our pitching staff to learn from that, right, I think it's going to carry on in the program for the years on end. And she's going to stay on for the next 2 years and be grad assistant, which I think is huge for us. But I think the other piece is those conversations that hitters have with pitchers are huge, right? So when somebody stands in, Rylan, I'm sure you guys talked to her today, when she's hitting against Brooke, and she's like, Brooke, this pitch is really hard to hit because of X, Y, and Z. Or Brooke going to Rylan and saying, hey, when you have a really good eye, it makes it hard for me because Brooke is really dynamic in the fact that her ball moves a lot. But if you are patient and don't swing at balls out of the zone, it becomes harder for her because she has so much break. So like having those conversations have been huge, but I think it helps our hitters, honestly, and it helps our pitchers. So our pitchers came to me and they're like, Coach, we want to get more live at-bats, and we want to make sure that, these hitters are here, and these are the reason why. And I was pumped because they picked our hard hitters, right? So like when pitchers are trying to feel good, they're like, oh, I'll take this pitcher or this hitter, And they came to me and they're like, hey, we want to face this hitter as many times as we possibly can because it's giving me good information. And I'm like, ooh, we're starting to get it. Like they want to face those challenging moments to get better, because when it comes up in games, they're going to be prepared for that. And that's where I feel like when you feel prepared in those pressure is just, it's not a real thing. It's what you put on yourself. And so when you're consistently putting yourselves in those environments, I'm a firm believer that you're going to succeed in those, difficult moments. So I'm excited. The conversations that we're having compared to last year are just eons ahead of each other.